Caleb Morgan dropped to his knees in the blood-stained snow. His hands trembled as he reached toward the small figure hiding beneath the overturned wagon. A child, no more than 7 years old. Her tiny fingers still clutched her dead mother's frozen hand. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I ain't gonna hurt you." The girl's green eyes stared at him, empty, hollow, already too old for such a young face. In that moment, Caleb made a promise that would change both their lives forever. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to my channel and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. The wolf's blood still dripped from Caleb Morgan's knife when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the howling wind or the groaning pines. Something human. Something small. He wiped the blade on his thigh and stood motionless, listening. His breath came out in white clouds that vanished into the gray Montana sky. The dead wolf lay at his feet, its amber eyes already glazing over with frost. There it was again. A whimper. Faint. Carried on the bitter wind from somewhere east. Caleb's horse, a sturdy buckskin named Jasper, tossed his head and stamped nervously. The animal sensed it too. Something wrong in the direction of the old mining road. Easy, boy. He mounted quickly, ignoring the ache in his bad leg, where a Confederate bullet had lodged itself 19 years ago. Some wounds never healed proper. Some just learned to live with you. The snow had started falling again, thick flakes that stuck to his beard and coated Jasper's mane. Caleb pulled his collar higher and urged the horse forward, following an instinct he couldn't name. He'd lived alone for 4 years now. 4 years since Ruth and little Lily had been taken by the scarlet fever that swept through Silver Creek in the spring of '79. 4 years of waking to empty silence, of cooking meals for one, of watching the sun set over mountains that no longer seemed beautiful. 4 years of existing without really living. The mining road appeared through the curtain of snow, a rutted path that wound up toward the abandoned Crane mining claims. Nobody used it anymore, not since the company moved operations further north. No reason for anyone to be out here in weather like this. Yet the tracks in the snow told a different story. Wagon wheels, deep grooves that spoke of heavy cargo, and alongside them, hoof prints, 3 horses, maybe 4, riding hard despite the treacherous conditions. Caleb's hand moved to the colt at his hip. Something about those tracks set his teeth on edge. The spacing was wrong. Whoever drove that wagon had been running from something, or someone. He followed the trail for nearly a mile before Jasper stopped, dead ears flattening against his skull. What is it? Then he saw it. The wagon lay on its side like a wounded animal, one wheel still spinning lazily in the wind. Canvas covering had been torn away, contents scattered across the snow clothes, a cracked mirror books with their pages fluttering like dying birds. And the blood. Dark stains spreading from beneath the wagon, already crystallizing in the cold. A woman's body lay face down in the crimson snow. Her arm stretched out toward something or someone she'd been trying to reach. Caleb dismounted slowly, rifle in hand. His eyes swept the perimeter, checking for danger, for the men who'd made those hoofprints. The tracks led away to the north, fresh enough that the riders couldn't be more than an hour ahead. They'd done what they came to do and left. He approached the woman carefully, though he already knew what he'd find. She was young, maybe 30, with auburn hair that spilled across the snow like autumn leaves. Her dress was simple, but well made. Not a frontier woman born to this harsh land, but someone from back east who'd ventured into country she didn't understand. The bullet wound in her back told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. God Almighty, he breathed. That's when he heard it again. That small, broken sound that had led him here. Caleb's head snapped toward the overturned wagon. A slight movement. A flash of something beneath the torn canvas. He moved forward slowly, holstering his rifle and holding both hands where they could be seen. Whatever was under there had already witnessed horror beyond imagining, No need to add to the terror. "Hello." His voice came out rougher than intended. He softened it, tried again. "Anyone there?" Silence. But the canvas rippled slightly, betraying a presence. Caleb knelt in the snow, ignoring the cold that seeped through his trousers. He was close enough now to see beneath the wagon's edge, close enough to see the small figure pressed against the wooden bed, making herself as tiny as possible. A child. A little girl with tangled auburn hair and eyes the color of spring grass. Those eyes stared at him without blinking, without hope, without anything at all. In her small hands, she clutched a worn leather satchel against her chest, like a shield. Caleb's heart seized in his chest. She looked like Lily. Not exactly Lily had Ruth's dark hair and his own gray eyes. But something in the way this child held herself, the stubborn set of her jaw, despite the terror, the fierce grip on that satchel, as if she'd die before letting it go. "Hey there," he said softly. "My name's Caleb. Caleb Morgan. I ain't gonna hurt you." Nothing. Not a word. Not a sound. Just those empty green eyes watching him like he might be another monster in a world that had already shown her too many. "I know you're scared. I know something terrible happened here, but you can't stay under there, little one. Storm's coming worse. You'll freeze." Still nothing. Caleb sat back on his heels thinking. He'd helped birth calves and gentled wild horses. He'd held dying men on battlefields and watched the light leave their eyes. But nothing had prepared him for this, a child so broken by violence that she'd retreated somewhere he couldn't reach. "That your mama?" he asked, gently gesturing toward the woman in the snow. The girl's eyes flickered. Her grip on the satchel tightened. "I'm sorry," Caleb said, and meant it with everything in him. "I'm so sorry, little one." Something shifted in those green depths. Not trust, he hadn't earned that. But perhaps the beginning of recognition that he was different from whoever had done this terrible thing. "I'm gonna bury her proper," he continued. "Give her a Christian burial. She deserves that much. But I need you to come out first. Need to know you're safe." The child's gaze moved past him to her mother's body. For the first time, her composure cracked. Her lower lip trembled. A single tear carved a path through the grime on her cheek. "Mama told me to hide," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Said don't come out no matter what. Don't make a sound. Your mama was smart. She saved your life. She's dead now." The flat way she said it, like stating the weather, or the time of day, broke something inside Caleb that he thought had died years ago. "Yeah," he said. "She is. And I'm sorry for that. But you ain't dead. You're alive. And I reckon your mama would want you to stay that way." The girl considered this with a gravity that no child should possess. Then slowly she began to move, crawling out from beneath the wagon on hands and knees, still clutching that satchel, never taking her eyes off Caleb. She was smaller than he'd realized. Thin. The dress she wore was too light for this weather, and she shook with cold, or fear, or both. Bruises marked her wrists. Older wounds not from today. Someone had been cruel to this child long before today's horror. Caleb shrugged off his sheepskin coat and held it out to her. "Here, put this on." She hesitated, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "It ain't a trick," he said. "You're freezing. I got enough stubborn in me to keep warm without it." Another long moment of assessment. Then small fingers reached out and took the coat. She wrapped it around herself, drowning in its size, looking even younger and more vulnerable than before. "What's your name?" Caleb asked. "Grace." Barely a whisper. "Grace Harper." "That's a real pretty name. Who were those men, Grace? The ones who did this?" Her whole body went rigid. The satchel pressed tighter against her chest. "Bad men," she said. "They wanted Papa's things. Mama said we had to run. Said we had to find someone called Marshall Dawson before they caught us." "Your Papa, where is he?" "Dead." That same flat tone. "They killed him in the mine. Made it look like an accident. But Mama knew. She found his notebook. Grace's eyes dropped to the satchel in her arms. Caleb understood then. Whatever was in that bag, whatever Thomas Harper had discovered, it was worth killing for. Worth chasing a woman and child across Montana territory in the dead of winter. Grace, I need you to listen to me careful like. He kept his voice steady, calm. Those men, they might come back. We need to get somewhere safe. I got a cabin about 5 miles south. It ain't much, but it's warm and there's food, and nobody knows where it is except me. Why should I trust you? The question hit him like a fist. Because she was right to ask. Because she'd already learned that adults lied, that they hurt, that they killed innocent women and left children to freeze in the snow. You shouldn't, he said honestly. You don't know me from Adam. All I can tell you is this, I ain't one of them. I got no quarrel with you or your mama or whatever's in that bag. I'm just a man who heard a sound in the storm and followed it. That's all. Grace studied him with those 2 old eyes, measuring, weighing. You got sad eyes, she said finally, like you lost somebody too. The observation struck him silent. 4 years he'd hidden his grief behind a wall of silence and solitude, and this child, this broken little girl, had seen right through him in minutes. I did, he admitted. My wife, my daughter. They died of fever a while back. What were their names? Ruth and Lily. My Lily was about your age when she passed. Something changed in Grace's expression. Not softening exactly, but a recognition. A understanding that they were both walking wounded, both survivors of a war they hadn't asked to fight. Mama said God takes people when he needs angels, Grace said quietly. But I don't think that's true. I think sometimes people just die and it ain't fair, and there ain't no reason for it. Caleb swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. I think you might be right about that. The wind howled louder, driving snow between them like a curtain. They needed to move, needed to get somewhere warm before the storm turned deadly. Will you come with me, Grace? Just for tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out what to do. Find this marshal your mama mentioned. But right now we gotta get out of this weather. Grace looked back at her mother's body. A fresh wave of grief washed across her young face, quickly suppressed. I can't leave her here. The wolves. I'll come back for her. First light. I'll bury her proper, I swear it. But she'd want you safe first. You know she would. A long, terrible pause. The snow fell harder. Grace shivered inside his coat. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Caleb rose slowly, not wanting to spook her. He retrieved his horse and led Jasper closer, then turned to lift Grace into the saddle. She flinched. Not dramatically, just a slight tensing, a reflexive pulling back. But Caleb caught it. He'd seen the same reaction in horses that had been beaten in dogs, that had learned to expect pain instead of kindness. I'm just going to help you up, he said carefully. That's all. Nothing more. Grace nodded, but her body remained rigid as his hands closed around her waist. She weighed almost nothing, a bundle of bones and fear wrapped in his oversized coat. He settled her in front of the saddle and mounted behind one arm, wrapped protectively around her small frame. She stiffened at the contact, then gradually by degrees allowed herself to lean back against his chest. Hold tight to that satchel, he told her. And hold tight to me. We got a long ride ahead. They turned away from the wagon and its cargo of death, heading south into the teeth of the storm. Behind them, the wind began to cover the tracks, erasing the evidence of violence, burying secrets beneath fresh snow. But some secrets refused to stay buried. As they rode, Grace spoke without prompting. Short sentences. Fragments of a nightmare. There were 3 of them. The man with the scar did the shooting. The others searched the wagon. They were looking for the notebook. Did they find it? No. Mama hid it in my dress before they stopped us. Told me not to tell no one. Said it was proof of what they did to Papa. Caleb's arm tightened around her. This child was carrying evidence of murder. Evidence someone was willing to kill to suppress. and now she was riding through a blizzard with a stranger placing her life in his hands because she had no other choice. "Grace, did they see you? The men who did this?" "I don't know. I was under the canvas, like Mama said. I heard them talking, heard them looking for something. Then they left." "But they didn't find you?" "No." Small mercy. The only one in this whole tragic mess. The snow fell heavier now, reducing visibility to a few yards. Caleb navigated by instinct and memory, following landmarks he'd memorized over 4 years of solitary existence. A distinctive rock formation here, a twisted pine there, signposts on a map only he could read. Grace had stopped talking. Her shivering had intensified despite the coat and his body heat. He needed to get her warm soon, or the cold would claim her as surely as those bullets had claimed her mother. "Almost there," he said, more to himself than to her. "Just a little further." An hour later, or what felt like an hour in the endless white, the cabin materialized through the storm. A small structure of solid log smoke, rising from the chimney where he'd banked the fire before leaving that morning. The most beautiful sight Caleb had seen in years. He dismounted quickly, lifting Grace down with careful hands. She swayed on her feet, exhausted and half-frozen, but still clutched that satchel like her life depended on it, which it probably did. "Inside," he said, guiding her toward the door. "I'll see to the horse and be right behind you." She hesitated at the threshold, looking back at him with those haunted green eyes. "You'll come back?" The question pierced him. Such a simple thing to ask, and such a profound one. Would he return, or would he abandon her like so many others had? "I'll be 5 minutes," he promised. "Count 'em if you want. I'll be right back." Grace nodded once and disappeared inside. Caleb led Jasper to the small stable attached to the cabin's north wall. His hands moved automatically, unsaddling, brushing, feeding, while his mind raced through possibilities and dangers. Those men would discover they hadn't recovered the notebook. They'd realize someone had survived, and they'd come looking. He had a few days, maybe. Time for the storm to pass and the roads to clear. Time for them to realize their mistake and retrace their steps. Time for Grace to rest, to eat, to recover some fraction of her strength. Then decisions would have to be made. When he entered the cabin, he found Grace standing exactly where he'd left her, just inside the door. She hadn't moved toward the fire, hadn't sat down, hadn't done anything except wait. "You can come in proper," he said gently. "Sit by the fire. Get warm. I'm dripping on your floor." The concern was so incongruous, so absurdly normal given what she'd endured, that Caleb almost laughed. Almost. "Floors survived worse. Come on." He guided her to the chair nearest the hearth, then busied himself building up the fire and heating water. Grace watched his every movement with that unnerving attention, tracking him like a wild animal watching a potential threat. "You hungry?" he asked. "I don't know." "When's the last time you ate?" She had to think about it. "Yesterday morning. Mama had some bread. She gave me most of hers." Nearly 2 days without proper food. Caleb felt a fresh surge of anger at the men who'd done this, who'd left a child to starve and freeze without a second thought. "I'll make something," he said. "Nothing fancy, but it'll fill you up." He set about preparing a simple stew from the provisions in his larder. Salt pork, potatoes, some dried vegetables. Not much, but hot and nourishing. While it cooked, he pulled a blanket from his bed and wrapped it around Grace's shoulders. She accepted it without protest, her eyes following him as he moved around the small cabin. "This where you live?" she asked. 4 years now, since Ruth and Lily passed. "It's quiet." "Yeah, I reckon that's why I chose it." Grace considered this. "Quiet can be good. Quiet means nobody's coming." The observation twisted something in his chest. This child had learned to associate silence with safety, noise with danger. What kind of life had she lived before today's horror? "Nobody's coming tonight," he assured her. "Storm's too bad. We're safe here. For now. He couldn't argue with that, so he didn't try. When the stew was ready, he filled 2 bowls and set one before Grace. She ate slowly, methodically, rationing each bite, as though unsure when her next meal might come. Another learned behavior, another sign of hardship that predated this nightmare. "Grace," he said carefully, "those bruises on your wrists. They ain't from today." Her spoon paused midway to her mouth. Her eyes flickered to the marks, then away. "Papa sometimes got angry," she said quietly. "When he'd been drinking. Mama said it wasn't really him, that the drink made him mean." Caleb's jaw tightened. Thomas Harper, whoever he'd been, whatever evidence he'd gathered had hurt his own daughter, had left marks on a child's skin. It didn't excuse his murder, but it complicated Caleb's feelings about the man considerably. "Ain't nobody got the right to hurt a child," he said firmly. "Don't matter if they're drinking or not. That ain't how a man treats his family." Grace looked up at him, something flickering in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or the beginning of something like trust. "Mama said the same thing. That's why we were leaving. Why she had the notebook. She said once people knew what he'd found out, we'd have enough money to go somewhere new, somewhere he couldn't follow. She was trying to protect you." "She always protected me." Grace's voice wavered for the first time since leaving the wagon. "Even at the end, she was protecting me." The tears came then, silent at first, sliding down her cheeks unheeded. Then harder, her small body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for hours. Caleb froze, uncertain. He hadn't comforted a crying child since Lily. Hadn't held anyone since Ruth took her last breath in his arms 4 years ago. But some instincts ran deeper than grief. He moved to kneel beside her chair, gathering her into his arms with gentle hands. She stiffened for a moment, that same flinching reflex, then collapsed against him, crying into his shirt, with all the anguish a 7-year-old shouldn't have to carry. "I got you," he murmured, one hand stroking her tangled hair. "I got you. Let it out." How long they stayed like that he couldn't say. Long enough for the fire to burn low and the stew to grow cold on the table. Long enough for Grace's sobs to fade into hiccups, then exhausted silence. Finally she pulled back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm being a bother." "You ain't a bother. Not even close. You just lost your mama in the worst way possible. Tears are the natural response to that. Papa said crying was weak." "Your papa was wrong about a lot of things, sounds like." Grace looked at him, really looked, and for the first time something like hope appeared in those green depths. "You're different," she said, "from other grown-ups." "How so?" "You say what you mean. You don't pretend things are fine when they ain't." "Never saw much point in pretending. World's hard enough without adding lies to it." She nodded, slowly absorbing this. Then, with the sudden shifts of childhood, her eyes grew heavy, the exhaustion she'd been fighting finally claiming its due. "You need sleep," Caleb said. "Take my bed. I'll sit up by the fire. You'll stay." That question again. That desperate need for reassurance that he wouldn't disappear like everyone else. "I'll be right here when you wake up. I promise." He helped her to the narrow bed in the corner, tucking the quilts around her small form. She was asleep almost before her head touched the pillow, the satchel still clutched against her chest. Caleb stood watching her for a long moment. This child who'd been thrust into his life by violence and chance. This orphan who'd looked at him with her mother's eyes and her own fierce spirit. He thought of Lily, of the empty years since her death, of the hollow man he'd become in her absence. He thought of Ruth's voice, gentle and certain, telling him that God worked in mysterious ways. Maybe this was what she'd meant. Maybe losing one family had been preparing him to save another. Outside, the storm howled against the cabin walls. Inside, Grace slept with the fitful restlessness of someone whose nightmares were too real to escape. And Caleb Morgan, who had thought himself beyond redemption, made a silent vow. Those men would come looking. He knew that with cold certainty. Whatever was in that notebook, whatever truth Thomas Harper had died for, it was dangerous enough to kill for. And they wouldn't stop until they'd silenced everyone who knew. But they would have to go through him first. He settled into the chair beside the bed rifle across his knees and waited for dawn. The fire crackled. The wind screamed. And somewhere in the darkness the wolves began to howl. Caleb didn't move. He'd found something worth protecting again. And this time, he would not fail. Grace woke screaming. Caleb was on his feet before his eyes fully opened, rifle in hand, scanning the cabin for threats. But there was no intruder, no danger except the ones living inside a 7-year-old's mind. "Mama! Mama! No!" He set the rifle aside and moved to the bed where Grace thrashed against the quilts, her small fists striking at phantoms only she could see. Her face was slick with sweat despite the cabin's chill, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Grace! Grace, wake up!" He didn't touch her. Instinct told him that would make it worse. Instead, he knelt beside the bed and spoke her name over and over, low and steady, until her eyes snapped open. For a terrible moment, she didn't know him. Those green eyes stared through him, still trapped in whatever nightmare had claimed her. "It's Caleb," he said quietly. "You're safe. You're in my cabin. Remember." Recognition crept back slowly. Her breathing steadied. The wild terror faded into something duller, but no less painful. "I saw her," Grace whispered. "I saw her fall. The blood on the snow. I couldn't help her. I just stayed hidden like she told me." "You did exactly what your mama wanted. You survived." "I should have done something. Screamed. Run at them. Something. Then you'd be dead too. And whatever your papa found, whatever's in that notebook, it'd be gone. Your mama gave her life so you could live. Don't dishonor that by wishing you died with her." The words came out harsher than he intended. But Grace needed to hear them, needed to understand that survival wasn't cowardice, that living carried its own kind of courage. She stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Papa used to say the same thing, that sometimes running away is braver than standing still." Sounds like he got at least one thing right. Gray light filtered through the cabin's single window. Dawn had come while Caleb dozed in his chair, and with it the storm's end. The wind had died to a whisper. The snow had stopped falling. Time to keep his promise. "I need to go back," he said, "to bury your mama. You'll stay here." Grace's eyes widened. "No, I want to come. It ain't something a child should see. I already saw her dead. I watched her die. I heard her." Grace's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "I heard her call my name when the bullet hit. I was right there hiding, and I didn't answer. I want to say goodbye proper." Caleb studied her face, looking for signs she might break. He found only determination carved from grief. "All right," he said finally. "But you do what I tell you when I tell you. No arguments." "Yes, sir." They ate a quick breakfast of cold biscuits and the remains of last night's stew. Grace ate more readily this morning, her body recognizing its need for fuel, even if her mind was elsewhere. As she finished, Caleb noticed her checking the satchel again, making sure it was still there, still safe. "Grace, I need to know what's in that notebook. The men who killed your mama, they'll come looking for it. I can't protect you proper if I don't understand what we're dealing with." She hesitated, fingers tightening on the leather strap. "Mama said not to show nobody." "Your mama didn't know about me. She couldn't have known you'd end up here. But I reckon if she could see us now, she'd want you to have help. She'd want you to have a fighting chance." The logic penetrated Grace's defenses. Slowly, reluctantly, she opened the satchel and withdrew a battered leather notebook. Papa worked at the Crane Mining Company. In the tunnels at first, then keeping records. He found out things. Bad things. Caleb took the notebook carefully, as though it might bite. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting columns of numbers, names, dates. Most of it meant nothing to him, but certain phrases jumped out. Safety inspections falsified. Support timbers never installed. Kickbacks to territorial officials. And then circled in heavy ink, Tunnel 7 collapse deliberate. 14 men killed. Insurance claim filed same day. Your papa was a bookkeeper. He kept track of the money, all of it. Where it went, where it came from. He said Mr. Crane was cheating the miners and the government both. Said when people found out he'd go to prison forever. Victor Crane. Grace nodded. Caleb knew the name. Everyone in Montana Territory did. Victor Crane was one of the richest men in the region, owner of mining operations that employed hundreds. He had connections in Helena in Washington. Men like that didn't go to prison. Men like that made problems disappear. Problems like Thomas Harper and his notebook. Problems like a 7-year-old witness. Grace, this is dangerous. More dangerous than you know. I know men killed my mama for it. I know they'd kill me too if they found me. How much more dangerous can it get? The matter-of-fact way she said it made Caleb's chest ache. This child had seen too much learned, too much grown too old in too short a time. We'll figure this out, he said, tucking the notebook into his own coat. But first we got a promise to keep. They rode out into a world transformed. The storm had buried everything under a thick blanket of white, smoothing the rough edges of the landscape into gentle curves. Beautiful if you didn't know what lay beneath. Grace sat in front of him, again, wrapped in a blanket over his coat. She was quiet, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where they'd find her mother's body. Tell me about her, Caleb said. Your mama. Why? Because I'm about to bury her, and I should know who she was. Grace was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steadier than he expected. Her name was Ellen Marie Harper. She grew up in Pennsylvania near Philadelphia. Her papa was a minister. She used to sing in the church choir. She teach you any songs? Some. Hymns mostly, and a lullaby about mockingbirds. She sounds like a good woman. She was. She tried to make Papa better. Tried to help him stop drinking. When that didn't work, she started planning. Saving money in a tin can under the floorboards. She said one day we'd leave and never look back. That's what you were doing, leaving? Yes. Papa got killed 2 weeks ago. Accident in the mine, they said. But Mama found his notebook hidden in the woodshed. She knew the truth. So she ran. We both ran. Took what we could carry and headed for Silver Creek. Mama heard there was a federal marshal there, man named Dawson, who wasn't in Crane's pocket. She thought he could help. Marshal James Dawson. Caleb knew him too, though they'd never met. The man had a reputation for honesty in a territory where honesty was often a death sentence. We almost made it, Grace continued, her voice dropping. We could see the road to town. Then they came out of the trees, 3 men on horses. The one with the scar did the talking. What did he say? Asked Mama where the notebook was. She said she didn't know what he meant. He didn't believe her. Grace's whole body tensed against Caleb's chest. He shot her like it was nothing, like she was a rabbit or a deer. Just pointed his gun and pulled the trigger. Mama fell, and he didn't even look back. Just told the others to search the wagon. But they didn't find you. Mama pushed me under the canvas right before. Told me to hide and not make a sound no matter what happened. So I didn't. I stayed quiet while they tore through our things. Stayed quiet while Mama bled out 10 feet away from me. Stayed quiet while she died calling my name. The last words came out in a rush, followed by a sob that Grace quickly swallowed. I should have gone to her. Should have held her hand. But I was too scared. I just laid there in the dark and let her die alone. Caleb pulled Jasper to a stop. He turned Grace to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Look at me. She did, tears streaming down her face. Your mama knew exactly what she was doing. She put you under that canvas because she wanted you to live. She called your name because she loved you, not because she blamed you. The last thing she did on this earth was protect her daughter. Don't you take that from her by feeling guilty about surviving. How do you know? Because that's what any parent would do. It's what Ruth would have done. It's what I would have done for Lily. His voice roughened. When you love a child, you'd give anything to keep them safe. Your mama gave everything. Honor that. Grace stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. You really lost them. Your wife and daughter. 4 years ago. The fever took them both in the same week. I buried them side by side on the hill behind the cabin. Do you still miss them? Every day. Every single day. Does it ever stop hurting? Caleb considered the question carefully. Grace deserved the truth, not comfortable lies. No, he said finally. It doesn't stop. But it changes. The sharp edges wear down some. You learn to carry it instead of being crushed by it. That's all any of us can do. Grace absorbed this, then nodded slowly. Thank you, she said, for telling me true. They rode on. The wagon came into view an hour later, half buried in fresh snow. Caleb dismounted first, checking the perimeter before helping Grace down. The scene was exactly as he'd left it, except now Ellen Harper's body was barely visible beneath its white shroud. Grace walked toward her mother with deliberate steps. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just stood looking down at the shape in the snow. Then she knelt and brushed the powder away from Ellen's face. She looks peaceful, Grace said quietly, like she's sleeping. That's a mercy. Can I have a minute before you start? Caleb moved away, giving her privacy for her grief. He checked the wagon more thoroughly than before, looking for anything useful they might need. Blankets, a small cooking pot, a sewing kit, a Bible with Ellen Harper's name inscribed on the first page, and hidden in a false bottom of a trunk, a small pouch of coins. Not much, but enough to matter. He gathered what seemed worth taking and loaded it onto Jasper. When he turned back, Grace was still kneeling beside her mother, her lips moving in silent conversation. Finally, she stood and walked back to him. I told her goodbye. I told her you were going to take care of me now, that I'd be okay. Caleb's throat tightened. I aim to make that true. The ground was frozen iron beneath the snow. Caleb worked for over an hour with the small shovel from the wagon, hacking through ice and earth, while Grace sat nearby wrapped in blankets against the cold. His shoulders burned, his hands blistered through his gloves, but he kept digging until he had something that approximated a proper grave. He carried Ellen Harper to her rest as gently as if she were sleeping, laid her down with her hands crossed over her chest, covered her with the quilt from the wagon, the one that still smelled faintly of lavender. Then he filled in the grave and fashioned a cross from broken wagon planks. You want to say some words? He asked Grace. She nodded and stepped forward, the Bible clutched in her small hands. The Lord is my shepherd. She began, her voice clear and steady. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. Caleb removed his hat and bowed his head. He hadn't prayed since Ruth and Lily died, hadn't seen the point. But standing here with this brave child, watching her bid farewell to the woman who'd given everything for her, he found himself mouthing the familiar words. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Grace's voice wavered, but didn't break. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. She looked up at Caleb, tears flowing freely now. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen, Caleb said. Amen, Grace whispered. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Grace reached into her pocket and withdrew something small, pressing it into the mound of earth. What's that? Caleb asked. A button. From Mama's Sunday dress. She gave it to me when I was little. Said as long as I had it, she'd always be with me. Grace's hand lingered on the grave. Now she can have it back, so she won't be lonely. The simple gesture broke something open in Caleb's chest. He thought of Lily's wooden toys still sitting on a shelf in his cabin, of Ruth's shawl hanging by the door, of all the small objects that carried enormous weight. "Your mama raised you right," he said, his voice rough. "She'd be proud of who you are." Grace looked up at him. "You think so? I know so." They left the grave behind and rode for Silver Creek. Caleb had decided during the burial that they couldn't hide forever. The storm had bought them time, but the men who killed Ellen would eventually piece together what happened. Better to get ahead of it. Find Marshall Dawson. Get the notebook into official hands. The town appeared in late afternoon, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a single main street. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys. People moved along the boardwalks going about their business. Caleb stopped at the edge of town studying the scene. "What are we looking for?" Grace asked. "Trouble. Always look before you walk into a new situation." Mama said the same thing. "Your mama was a smart woman." He counted 3 saloons, a general store, a hotel, a livery stable. The sheriff's office sat at the far end of the street, a star painted on its door. No sign of a federal marshal's office, but that didn't mean much. Dawson could be working out of anywhere. "Stay close to me," Caleb instructed. "Don't talk to nobody. Don't look at nobody. We find out where Dawson is, deliver the notebook, and get out. What if the bad men are here? Then we deal with that when it happens." They rode slowly down Main Street. Caleb felt eyes on them, the natural curiosity of small-town folk toward strangers. He kept his expression neutral, his hand within reach of his Colt. The general store seemed the best place to start. He tied Jasper to the rail and helped Grace down, keeping her close as they entered. A woman stood behind the counter, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. But her eyes were kind as they settled on Grace. "Well, hello there. Ain't you a little thing? What can I do for you folks?" "Looking for information," Caleb said. "Federal marshal named Dawson. He's supposed to be around these parts." The woman's expression shifted slightly, something guarded entering her gaze. "Jim Dawson. He comes through now and then. Ain't seen him in a week or so. Why you looking for a marshal?" "Business." "What kind of business brings a man and a little girl asking after federal law on a winter afternoon?" Caleb met her gaze steadily. "The private kind, ma'am." The woman studied him for a long moment. Then her attention moved to Grace, taking in the too large coat, the haunted eyes, the way she pressed close to Caleb's side. "That your daughter?" "She is now." Something in his tone must have communicated more than the words, because the woman's expression softened. "Name's Martha Hensley. I run this store and the boarding house next door. Been in Silver Creek 30 years. I know most everyone and most everything that happens around here." "Caleb Morgan, this is Grace." Martha came around the counter and crouched down to Grace's level. "You look like you've had a hard time of it, sweetheart. You hungry? I got fresh bread in the back, still warm from the oven." Grace looked up at Caleb for permission. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am," Grace said quietly. "I'd like that." Martha led them through a doorway into a warm kitchen that smelled of baking bread and wood smoke. She sat Grace at a scarred wooden table and placed a thick slice of bread with butter and honey before her. "Eat up. A child needs feeding." While Grace ate, Martha turned her attention back to Caleb. "Now then, you want to tell me what's really going on, because a man don't ride into town with a little girl who ain't his looking for a federal marshal without a story behind it." Caleb considered his options. Martha Hensley seemed trustworthy, but seemed wasn't the same as was. Still, they needed help, needed allies. "Her mama was killed yesterday," he said, keeping his voice low. "About 5 miles north of here. Shot down by men who were after something her husband found. Something that could hurt some powerful people." Martha's face went pale. "Ellen Harper." Caleb froze. "You knew her?" "She came through here 2 days ago. Stopped for supplies. Asked about Jim Dawson, same as you. I told her he was expected back any day. Martha's hand pressed against her mouth. Lord have mercy. That poor woman. That poor child. Grace had stopped eating, her eyes fixed on the conversation. You know who might have done this, Caleb pressed. I got suspicions. Same as everyone with sense in these parts. Martha glanced toward the front of the store, lowering her voice further. Victor Crane's name gets whispered when bad things happen to people who cross him. But nobody says it out loud. Nobody dares. Crane Mining Company. The same. Tom Harper worked for them before his accident. And his widow just happens to get killed on her way to talk to a federal marshal. Martha shook her head. That ain't coincidence. Is there anyone in this town we can trust? Anyone who might help? Martha thought for a moment. Pastor Cole at the church. He's a good man. Gives sanctuary to those who need it. And Doc Williams, though he drinks too much. Beyond that, she shrugged helplessly. Crane's money flows through everything here. Hard to know who's bought and who ain't. Caleb absorbed this information. They were more isolated than he'd hoped. What about you? Where do you stand? Martha's chin lifted. I lost my husband and son in a cave-in at Crane's mine 6 years ago. Same mine where Tom Harper had his accident. You think I got any love for that man? Before Caleb could respond, the front door of the store banged open. A man's voice carried through the building. Martha, you in here? Martha's expression flickered with something like fear quickly suppressed. Stay quiet, she whispered to Caleb. Let me handle this. She moved back into the store. Caleb eased toward the doorway, hand on his pistol. Through the gap, he could see a tall man in a black coat standing at the counter. Well-dressed, well-fed. The kind of man who expected others to jump when he spoke. Mr. Burke. Martha said, her voice carefully neutral. What can I do for you, Burke? The name meant nothing to Caleb, but the way Martha held herself tight and wary told him plenty. Looking for information. Word is a woman and child came through here couple days back, heading toward the marshal's office. Lots of people come through. Can't remember them all. This one you'd remember. Auburn hair. Little girl about 7 years old. They'd have been asking questions. Caleb's hand tightened on his pistol. He felt Grace move up beside him, peering through the crack in the doorway. That's him. She breathed so quiet only Caleb could hear. That's the man who shot Mama. Caleb looked down at her. Grace's face had gone white, her whole body trembling. But her eyes burned with something beyond fear. You're sure? I'll never forget his face. Never. Through the doorway, Burke was still pressing Martha. Mr. Crane is very concerned about this woman. She stole something valuable from the company. We just want to recover it. There'd be a reward for anyone who helps. Like I said, can't recall anyone particular. But if I see a woman matching that description, I'll surely let you know. Burke smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. See that you do, Martha. Mr. Crane values loyalty, and he has a long memory for those who disappoint him. He turned and walked out the door, slamming behind him. Martha sagged against the counter. When Caleb emerged from the kitchen, she looked at him with fresh fear in her eyes. You need to leave. Now. Silas Burke is Crane's right hand. If he finds that child, he won't. You don't understand. That man is a killer. Everyone knows it. Nobody can prove it. Martha gripped his arm. Take her and go, far away from here. Forget about the marshal, forget about justice. Just run. Caleb looked back at Grace, who had followed him out of the kitchen. Her small face was set with determination that shouldn't exist in one so young. Grace, he asked, what do you want to do? She was quiet for a moment. Then, Mama didn't die so we could run away. She died so the truth could come out. If we give up now, they win. And all those men Papa wrote about in his notebook, they keep dying in mines that ain't safe. More mamas lose their sons. More children lose their papas. Martha stared at the girl with something like wonder. How old are you, child? 7, ma'am. Lord above, 7 years old with the heart of a lion. Caleb made his decision. We'll stay at your boarding house tonight. Tomorrow we find out when Dawson's expected back. That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. Might as well be dangerous while working toward something good. Martha held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Rooms in the back. Private entrance through the alley. I'll bring food when it's dark. She looked at Grace with something like respect. Your mama raised one hell of a daughter, sweetheart. You make her proud. Grace's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I'm trying, ma'am. I'm trying. That night in a small room with a narrow bed and a single window overlooking the alley, Caleb watched Grace sleep. She'd eaten everything Martha brought, then collapsed into exhausted slumber almost immediately. The notebook sat heavy in his coat pocket. Evidence of murder, of fraud, of corruption, reaching into the highest levels of territorial government. All of it resting on the survival of one man and one small girl. Outside Silver Creek settled into uneasy silence. Somewhere in that darkness, Silas Burke was hunting, asking questions, getting closer. Caleb checked his pistol one more time and settled into the chair by the window. He'd found something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. And tomorrow, the fight would truly begin. 3 days passed without sign of Marshal Dawson. Caleb grew more restless with each hour. Martha brought news from the town when she delivered their meals, and none of it was good. Silas Burke had doubled his inquiries. 2 more men had arrived from the Crane Mining headquarters. Rewards were being offered for information about the Harper woman's whereabouts. People are starting to talk, Martha warned on the 3rd evening. Someone saw a man and child ride in the day after the storm. It's only a matter of time before Burke puts it together. We can't wait much longer. Dawson sent word he'd be back by week's end. 3 more days, maybe 4. Caleb shook his head. We don't have 3 days. Grace sat at the small table practicing her letters on a piece of paper Martha had given her. She looked up at the adults' tense conversation. What if we don't wait for the marshal to come here? She asked. What if we go find him? He could be anywhere in the territory, sweetheart. But he's coming from somewhere. If we ride out to meet him, we get away from the bad men and find help at the same time. Caleb and Martha exchanged glances. The logic was sound if risky. Do you know which direction Dawson travels from? Caleb asked. Usually comes in from the east. Helena way. There's a stage road that runs through Miller's Pass. How far? 2 days hard riding in good weather. Longer with a child. Grace set down her pencil. I can ride hard. Mama and I traveled for a week before they caught us. I didn't slow her down none. The determination in her voice reminded Caleb painfully of Lily. His daughter had possessed that same stubborn streak, that same refusal to be treated as less capable than she was. We leave before dawn, he decided. Martha, I need supplies. Food for a week. Ammunition if you've got it. I'll have everything ready. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the alley below, turning plans over in his mind. Every option carried risk. Staying meant eventual discovery. Running meant traveling exposed through territory where Burke's men could be anywhere. You're worried. Grace's voice startled him. She'd woken without sound, and now stood beside his chair, her small face pale in the moonlight. Thought you were sleeping. I was pretending, so you wouldn't fret about me. Caleb almost smiled. That's supposed to be my job, fretting about you. Mama used to fret. Papa too when he wasn't drinking. I got used to pretending so they wouldn't worry worse. She climbed into the chair across from him, pulling her knees to her chest. In the darkness, she looked even smaller than usual, more vulnerable. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. When your daughter died, did you want to die too? The question hit him like a physical blow. He stared at Grace, at her 2 old eyes, at the weight of understanding behind them. Yes, he admitted. For a long while I did. What stopped you? I don't rightly know. Cowardice maybe, or stubbornness. Woke up each morning expecting not to care about seeing another sunset and somehow kept waking up anyway. Grace nodded slowly. I felt that way after Papa died, after Mama too. Like there wasn't any point to anything anymore. Do you still feel that way? She considered the question seriously. Sometimes, but less since you found me. You make me feel like maybe there's still good things ahead, even if I can't see them yet. Caleb's throat tightened. There are good things ahead, Grace. I promise you that. You keep making promises. I keep meaning them. A small smile touched her lips. I know. That's why I believe you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moon track across the narrow strip of sky visible through the window. Then Grace spoke again. Caleb! What happens after we find the marshal and given the notebook? Justice, hopefully. The men who hurt your mama get punished. Crane gets exposed for what he did. I mean, what happens to me? The question he'd been avoiding. The one that had no easy answer. What do you want to happen? Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want to stay with you. In your cabin. I want to learn to ride proper and tend the animals and maybe have a garden when spring comes. I want... She stopped, swallowed hard. I want to stop being scared all the time. I want to feel safe. You want a home. I want a family. Her eyes met his in the darkness. I know you ain't my real papa. I know you got your own grief to carry. But you're the first grown-up who ever made me feel like I mattered. Like I was worth protecting. Mama tried, but she was always so scared of Papa, and Papa was always so angry. You're different. Caleb leaned forward, taking her small hands in his calloused ones. Grace Harper, you listen to me. I didn't go looking for a daughter that night in the storm. I was tracking a wolf, same as I'd done 100 times before. But finding you, that changed something in me. Something I thought was dead and gone. What do you mean? I mean, I ain't just protecting you because it's right, though it is. I'm protecting you because somewhere in these past few days, you became mine. And I don't know exactly how that happened or what it means for the future. But I know this: wherever you go, I go. Whatever comes, we face it together. Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. You mean it? I mean it with everything I got. She launched herself into his arms, burying her face against his chest. Her small body shook with sobs that were equal parts grief and relief. I was so scared you'd leave me somewhere. With strangers. Like what happened to Jimmy Wilson after his folks died. They sent him to an orphanage in Helena, and nobody ever heard from him again. That ain't happening. Not ever. You understand? Yes, sir. Say it back to me, so I know you believe it. Grace pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. You're my family now, she said. And I'm yours. And nobody's taking me away. That's right. Nobody. They stayed like that until the sky began to lighten. Then Caleb sent Grace to wash up and dress while he gathered their few belongings. Martha was waiting in the alley when they slipped out the back entrance. She'd prepared 2 horses instead of one, the second being a sturdy mare. Figured the girl could use her own mount if you need to move fast. I can't pay for this. Wasn't asking for payment. Just bring her back safe when this is all over. That'll be payment enough. Grace stepped forward and hugged the older woman fiercely. Thank you, Mrs. Hensley, for everything. Martha's stern face softened. You take care, little one. And you mind Mr. Morgan. He's good people. I know he is. They mounted up and headed east, keeping to back trails that wound through the hills above the main road. Caleb set a steady pace, not fast enough to exhaust the horses, but quick enough to put distance between them and Silver Creek. The morning passed without incident. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horses and eat some of the food Martha had packed. Grace handled her mare with surprising skill, guiding the animal through difficult terrain without complaint. Your mama teach you to ride? Some. Mostly I learned watching the stable boys back in town. Mama didn't like me going there, said it wasn't proper for a girl, but I went anyway when she wasn't looking. You got a rebellious streak. Mama said the same thing, said I got it from her side of the family. They remounted and continued east. The terrain grew rougher as they climbed toward Miller's Pass. Caleb kept his eyes moving constantly, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. So far, nothing. By late afternoon, they'd reached a narrow canyon that cut through the hills. The stage road ran along its floor, visible from the ridge where they'd stopped. We'll follow this toward the pass, Caleb explained. Stay high where we can see anyone coming. What if the marshal's already on the road? Won't we miss him? We'll check from time to time, but I'd rather approach from above than get caught in the open down there. They picked their way along the ridge as shadows lengthened. The canyon walls glowed orange in the fading sunlight. Beautiful country, Caleb thought. Dangerous country. Caleb, I need to stop. He reined in immediately. What's wrong? Grace's face had gone pale. Nothing's wrong. I just need to stop. For a minute. Understanding dawned. Oh, right. There's some brush over there. I'll wait here. She dismounted and disappeared into a thicket of scrub oak. Caleb stayed in the saddle watching the canyon below. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Grace. No answer. Grace. He was off his horse and moving before the echo died. The thicket wasn't large, maybe 20 yards across. She should have been right there. But she wasn't. Caleb's blood went cold. He drew his pistol and pushed deeper into the brush, every sense straining for sound or movement. Then he heard it. A muffled cry, coming from somewhere below the ridge. He found the tracks immediately. Grace's small footprints overlaid by larger boots. 2 men, maybe 3. They'd been waiting, watching. They'd grabbed her when she went into the brush alone. No. The word tore from his throat. He followed the tracks at a run, heedless of noise or caution. The trail led down a steep slope toward a dry creek bed that ran parallel to the canyon. He spotted them 50 yards ahead. 3 men on horseback, one of them carrying Grace across his saddle. She was struggling fighting, but the man had her pinned. Grace. The men turned. The one holding Grace grinned. Silas Burke's face was unmistakable, even at this distance. Morgan, looking for something. Caleb raised his pistol but couldn't fire. Not with Grace in the line of sight. Burke knew it too. Put the gun down or I snap her neck. You harm one hair on her head and I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Big words from a man standing alone against 3 guns. Burke shifted Grace in front of him like a shield. Mr. Crane would like a word with this little lady. Something about property that belongs to him. She don't belong to nobody but herself. The notebook, Morgan. That's all we want. Hand it over and maybe we let you both walk away. Grace's voice rang out high and fierce. Don't give it to them. It's the only proof of what they did. Burke's hand clamped over her mouth. Quiet, brat. Caleb's mind raced. He couldn't shoot without risking Grace. Couldn't comply without condemning both of them. Burke would never let witnesses live, notebook or no notebook. Let me see her face, he said, stalling. Need to know she's unharmed. She's fine, for now. That ain't good enough. Burke hesitated, then removed his hand from Grace's mouth. She immediately bit down on his wrist. Hard. He yelped and jerked back. Grace threw herself sideways, tumbling off the horse and hitting the ground hard. She rolled and scrambled toward a cluster of rocks. Caleb fired. The shot caught one of Burke's men in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle. The second man raised his rifle, but Caleb was already moving, diving behind a boulder as bullets kicked up dirt around him. Grace, stay down. I'm okay. He could see her now, pressed flat behind the rocks, small but safe for the moment. Burke was cursing, trying to control his spooked horse while drawing his weapon. Caleb fired again. The shot went wide, but it forced Burke to take cover. A rifle cracked from somewhere above them. One of the remaining men fell. Then, a voice Caleb didn't recognize boomed across the creek bed. "Federal Marshal, drop your weapons!" Burke's head snapped toward the ridge. A man on horseback had appeared against the sunset rifle, already trained on the remaining outlaws. More men emerged behind him, fanning out to cut off escape routes. "This ain't your business, Dawson." "Murder makes it my business. Kidnapping a child makes it personal. Now drop the damn gun, or I drop you." For a long moment, Burke didn't move. His eyes found Caleb's across the distance, and the hate in them was bottomless. Then he threw his gun down and raised his hands. Caleb was already running. He reached Grace as she emerged from behind the rocks, scooping her into his arms and holding her so tight she squeaked. "You're okay. Thank God you're okay." "I fought back, like you would've. You scared me half to death. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. You did good." He pulled back to look at her. "You did real good." Marshal James Dawson rode up and dismounted. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and gray-bearded, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in hard country. His eyes moved between Caleb Grace and the prisoners his deputies were securing. "You'd be Caleb Morgan," he said. "Martha Hensley sent word you might be coming this direction." "She's a good woman." "Best there is." Dawson crouched down to Grace's level. "And you must be Grace Harper. Your mama was a brave lady coming all this way to find me." Grace's chin lifted. "She was the bravest person I ever knew." "I believe that." The marshal straightened. "I hear you've got something for me. Something that might put some bad men away for a long time." Caleb reached into his coat and withdrew the notebook. It felt lighter now somehow, the weight of responsibility shifting to broader shoulders. "Everything's in here. Names, dates, money trails. Evidence of murder and corruption going back years." Dawson took the notebook with something like reverence. "Tom Harper was a good man. Came to me 6 months ago scared but determined. Said he'd stumbled onto something that could bring down an empire. I told him to gather proof and bring it to me when he had enough." The marshal's face darkened. "I didn't know they'd kill him before he could. They killed his wife too. Shot her down in cold blood right in front of their daughter." Dawson's gaze moved to Grace with new understanding. "I'm sorry, child. More sorry than I can say. But I promise you this, what your parents sacrificed for won't be wasted. Victor Crane and everyone who works for him will answer for what they've done." "Will they hang?" The question was asked without malice. Simple curiosity about justice. "If the evidence supports it, yes. Some of them will hang." Grace nodded. "Good." One of the deputies approached. "Marshal, what do we do with Burke?" "Chain him good. He rides in the wagon with the others. I want him alive to testify." Dawson turned back to Caleb. "You and the girl will need to come to Helena. There'll be questions, depositions, a trial eventually." "How long?" "Could be weeks, months even. Case this big takes time." Caleb felt Grace's hand slip into his. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. "We'll do whatever's needed," he said. "But the girl's been through enough. I won't let anyone badger her or make her relive things she shouldn't have to." "Fair enough. We'll be gentle as we can." Dawson extended his hand. "You did good, Morgan, keeping her safe, keeping that notebook out of Crane's hands. A lot of men would have looked the other way. Wasn't an option. It's always an option, just not one good men choose." They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow near the creek. The deputies kept watch over the prisoners, while Dawson sat with Caleb and Grace by a small fire. Grace had been quiet since the confrontation. She ate the food that was offered and answered questions when asked, but her eyes had that distant look that worried Caleb. "You okay?" he asked when they were alone. "I thought they had me. When that man grabbed me, I thought it was over, that I'd never see you again." "But you fought. You got away." "Because you taught me to. That first morning when you showed me how to watch for danger, how to run and hide if trouble came. I remembered. Caleb reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Grace, I'm sorry. I should have been more careful. Should have checked that thicket before letting you go alone. It ain't your fault. They were waiting, probably been following us all day. Still, I should have protected you better. Grace shook her head firmly. You came for me. Soon as you knew something was wrong, you came running. That's what matters. I'll always come for you, no matter what. I know. She leaned against his shoulder. That's why I wasn't scared. Not really. Even when that man had me on his horse, I knew you'd find me. They sat together watching the fire burn low. Around them the prairie stretched vast and dark under a canopy of stars. Somewhere a coyote called, answered by another in the distance. Caleb? Yeah. When all this is over, can we go home? Back to your cabin. Our cabin, he corrected. And yes, soon as we can. Will you teach me to track wolves and ride proper, and all the other things you know? I'll teach you everything, every last thing I got to offer. Grace smiled. The first real smile he'd seen from her since this nightmare began. Good, she said, because I got a lot of learning to do, and I reckon you're the best teacher I could ever have. She fell asleep against his shoulder, small and warm and alive. Caleb stayed awake long after watching the stars wheel overhead, thinking about the road behind them and the road ahead. They weren't safe yet. Trials and testimonies waited in Helena. Powerful men would fight to protect themselves. There would be more danger, more fear, more moments when everything hung in the balance. But for now, this moment, this small circle of firelight, this child breathing softly against his chest, it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Helena was bigger than anything Grace had ever seen. She pressed close to Caleb as they rode down the main street, her eyes wide at the brick buildings, the gas lamps, the crowds of people moving in every direction. After days in the wilderness, the noise and bustle felt overwhelming. Stay close, Caleb murmured. We'll get through this. Marshal Dawson led them to the federal courthouse, an imposing stone structure that dominated the center of town. Inside, clerks hurried through corridors carrying stacks of paper. Lawyers in fine suits argued in hushed voices. Everything smelled of ink and dust and importance. You'll stay in the witness quarters, Dawson explained. Secure rooms in the basement. Nobody gets in or out without my say-so. Like a jail. Like protection. Crane's got eyes everywhere in this city. Until the trial's done, you're both targets. The witness quarters turned out to be a small suite of rooms, Spartan but clean. 2 beds, a table, a few chairs. A single window set high in the wall, barred against intrusion. Grace explored the space with cautious curiosity while Caleb spoke with Dawson at the door. How long before the trial starts? 2 weeks, maybe 3. The prosecutor's building his case. Needs time to review the notebook, corroborate the evidence, line up witnesses. And until then, you wait, both of you. Dawson's voice softened. I know it's hard, but we're close now. Real close to bringing these men to justice. Just need a little more patience. Patience. Caleb had learned patience in the long years of solitude, but watching Grace pace the small room like a caged animal, he wondered how much patience a 7-year-old could muster. The days blurred together. Lawyers came to interview them, asking the same questions over and over. Grace answered with steady calm, recounting her mother's death. Her father's discoveries, the men who'd hunted them across Montana. Each telling cost her something. Caleb could see it in the shadows deepening under her eyes. You don't have to do this, he told her one night. I can tell them you're too young, that you can't remember. But I do remember. Every bit of it. Grace's jaw set stubbornly. Mama didn't die so I could stay quiet. She died so the truth could come out. I ain't stopping now. You're the bravest person I know. I learned from you. On the 10th day, everything changed. Caleb woke to the sound of voices in the corridor. Urgent voices. He was on his feet before his eyes fully opened, reaching for the pistol Dawson had let him keep. The door burst open. But it wasn't attackers. It was Dawson himself, his face grim. "We got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Victor Crane escaped federal custody 2 hours ago. Someone on the inside helped him. We don't know who yet." Grace sat up in bed, instantly alert. "He's coming for us." "We don't know that." "Yes, we do." Her voice was flat with certainty. "He won't let us testify. He'll do whatever it takes to stop us." Dawson exchanged a look with Caleb. The child was right. They all knew it. "I'm doubling the guards, moving you to a more secure location." "Where?" "Fort Harrison. Military installation 20 miles north. Crane's reach doesn't extend there." They left within the hour, bundled into a covered wagon with 6 armed deputies riding escort. Grace huddled against Caleb, her eyes fixed on the canvas covering, as though she could see through it to whatever dangers lurked outside. "It's gonna be okay," he told her. "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it. And sometimes, belief is all we got." The road to Fort Harrison wound through forested hills. Caleb kept his pistol ready, watching for any sign of ambush. The deputies rode in tense silence, hands never far from their weapons. They were 2 miles from the fort when the shooting started. The first shot took the lead deputy from his saddle. The second spooked the horses into chaos. Suddenly, men were emerging from the trees on both sides of the road, rifles blazing. "Get down!" Caleb threw himself over Grace as bullets punched through the wagon's canvas. He could hear the deputies returning fire horses, screaming men shouting, "Under the seat! Now!" Grace scrambled into the small space beneath the wagon's bench, while Caleb kicked out the rear canvas and started shooting. He caught one attacker in the chest, another in the leg. But there were too many. 8, maybe 10 men against their depleted escort. A bullet grazed his shoulder. He barely felt it. "Morgan, we gotta move." Dawson appeared at the wagon's edge, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. Half the deputies were down. The rest were falling back toward a rocky outcropping 50 yards away. "Grace, come on!" He pulled her from under the seat, and they ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around their feet. Grace stumbled twice, but kept moving. Caleb's wounded shoulder screamed as he lifted her over a fallen log. They reached the rocks as another deputy fell. Now it was just Dawson, Caleb, Grace, and 2 surviving men against Crane's small army. "How many rounds you got?" 12, maybe 15. "Make 'em count." The attackers pressed forward, using the wagon for cover. Caleb fired carefully, conserving ammunition, dropping a man with each shot. But they kept coming. "We can't hold them," one of the deputies gasped. "There's too many." Grace tugged at Caleb's sleeve. "There's a gully behind us. I saw it when we ran. If we can get to it, maybe we can circle around." Caleb risked a glance back. She was right. A narrow wash cut through the hillside, hidden by brush. Might lead somewhere. Might lead nowhere. But staying meant dying. "Dawson, cover us." "What are you doing?" "Getting her out. Whatever happens, keep shooting." He grabbed Grace and ran. More bullets, a hot sting across his ribs. Then they were sliding down into the gully, tumbling through mud and dead leaves. "Keep moving. Don't stop." The gully wound uphill away from the fight. Caleb could hear the gunfire fading behind them, but didn't slow. His shoulder burned. His side was wet with blood. None of it mattered. Only Grace mattered. They emerged onto a ridge overlooking the valley. Below, the battle still raged. But now Caleb could see something else. Riders approaching from the north. A column of blue-coated cavalry, their guidons snapping in the wind. "The fort," he breathed. They heard the shooting. The cavalry hit Crane's men like a wave, breaking on rocks. In minutes, the ambush became a rout. Attackers scattered into the trees, pursued by soldiers. Others threw down their weapons and surrendered. Grace sagged against Caleb's chest. Is it over? I think so. I think it's finally over. They made their way back down to the road as the cavalry commander took control of the scene. Dawson had survived, though barely. 3 deputies lay dead. The wagon was destroyed, but they were alive. A sergeant approached, taking in Caleb's wounds with professional concern. "You need a doctor, sir." "I need to know if Crane was with them." "We captured most of the attackers, questioning them now. Find out where Crane is. He's the one behind all this." The questioning took an hour. Caleb refused treatment until he had answers, despite Grace's worried protests. Finally, a young lieutenant approached with news. "One of the prisoners is talking. Says Crane's holed up at an abandoned mining camp about 10 miles east, place called Dead Man's Hollow." "How many men with him?" 4, maybe 5. Rest were here." Caleb started to rise. Dawson's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "You're in no condition to go after him. He'll run. Every minute we wait, he gets further away." "Then let the cavalry handle it." "The cavalry don't know that terrain. I do." Caleb's eyes met the marshal's. "I tracked wolves through those hills for 4 years. I know every ravine, every hiding spot. I can find him." "And what about her?" Dawson gestured to Grace, who sat wrapped in a soldier's coat watching them with hollow eyes. Caleb hesitated. He couldn't take her with him, couldn't leave her either. The conflict tore at him. Grace stood and walked over. Her face was pale but determined. "Go," she said. "Grace? He killed my mama. He'll keep killing unless someone stops him. You're the only one who can." She took his hand, her small fingers cold against his skin. "I'll be safe here with the soldiers. You finish this." "I don't want to leave you." "You ain't leaving me. You're protecting me. Same as always. Just from further away." Caleb knelt, ignoring the pain that lanced through his shoulder. "I'll come back. I swear it." "I know you will. You always keep your promises." He pulled her into a fierce embrace, memorizing the feel of her small body, the smell of her hair, the steady beat of her heart. Then he let go. "Watch her," he told Dawson. "With your life." "You have my word." Caleb mounted a cavalry horse and rode east, toward Dead Man's Hollow, toward Victor Crane, toward the end of this nightmare, one way or another. The mining camp appeared as dusk fell, a cluster of abandoned buildings, huddled at the base of a cliff. No lights burned, no smoke rose, but fresh tracks led into the narrow canyon that served as the only entrance. Caleb dismounted and approached on foot, using every skill 4 years of solitude had taught him. He moved like a ghost through the fading light, pistol-drawn senses straining. He found the first guard slumped against a boulder, asleep or drunk. Either way, he'd never wake. Caleb's knife saw to that. The second was more alert, but died just as quietly. 2 more waited near the largest building. Caleb took them both with a single rifle shot, each moving before they could return fire. Years of hunting wolves had made him precise. Merciful. Then there was only Crane. Caleb kicked in the door and found him sitting behind a desk, a glass of whiskey in one hand and a pistol in the other. The mining baron looked older than Caleb expected, smaller. Without his empire of money and murder, he was just a man, a frightened man. "Morgan." Crane didn't seem surprised. "I wondered when you'd come." "Put the gun down." "Why? So you can drag me back to hang? I think not." "You're gonna answer for what you did, all of it. The miners you killed, the families you destroyed, Ellen Harper and her daughter." The Harper woman was unfortunate, a loose end that needed tying. She was a mother. She was trying to protect her child. "And you've become quite attached to that child, haven't you?" Crane's lips curved in something like a smile. "The noble rancher and his orphan ward, how touching." Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. "One more word about her, and I'll forget I came to bring you back alive." "Is that what you came for, Justice?" Crane laughed bitterly. "There is no justice. Not for men like me. I own judges. I own senators. Even if you drag me back to Helena, I'll be free within a year. And then, He raised his glass in mock toast. "Then I'll tie up every loose end, starting with that little girl." Something snapped inside Caleb. He didn't remember crossing the room, didn't remember knocking the gun from Crane's hand, only remembered the satisfaction of his fist connecting with the man's face again and again until Crane lay bloody and broken on the floor. "You don't get to threaten her." Caleb set his voice strange even to his own ears. "You don't get to speak her name. You don't get to live in a world where she's afraid of you anymore." Crane spat blood and laughed. "You're no better than me. Look at yourself, ready to kill an unarmed man." "You're right about one thing." Caleb raised his pistol, aiming between Crane's eyes. "I ain't better than you, but she is. And for her sake, I'm gonna let you face trial. Let you face the families of all those men you killed. Let you see justice done proper." He pulled Crane to his feet and bound his hands with rope from the desk. "But know this, if you ever get free, if you ever come anywhere near Grace Harper, I'll find you. And next time there won't be a trial." Crane said nothing. Perhaps he believed the threat. Perhaps he was too beaten to argue. Either way, he went quietly as Caleb led him out into the night. The ride back to Fort Harrison took most of the night. Caleb's wounds had opened again, blood seeping through makeshift bandages. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not until he saw Grace again. Dawn was breaking when the fort's walls came into view. Soldiers stood guard at the gates more than before. Security had been tightened. Grace was waiting in the courtyard when they arrived. She looked small and lost among all those uniformed men, but her face lit up when she saw Caleb. She ran to him as he dismounted, throwing herself into his arms despite his wounds, despite the blood, despite everything. "You came back." "I promised." "Is it over?" Caleb looked at Crane being led away by soldiers, at Dawson emerging from the headquarters building, at the sun rising over the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold. "Yeah," he said, holding Grace tight. "It's over." They stood together in the early morning light, two broken people who'd found each other in a storm and held on through everything that followed. Behind them, a monster was finally caged. Ahead, a future waited to be written. But for now, this moment was enough. This child in his arms. This second chance at family. This love he hadn't known he was still capable of feeling. "Let's go home," Grace whispered. "Soon," Caleb promised. "Real soon." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Grace testified on the 4th day. She walked into that courtroom with her chin held high, wearing a new dress Martha Hensley had sent from Silver Creek. Caleb sat in the front row, close enough that she could see him if she needed to. She didn't look at him once during her testimony. Didn't need to. She knew he was there. "Can you tell the court what happened on the day your mother died?" Grace's voice came out clear and steady. "We were running. Mama said we had to reach Marshal Dawson before the bad men caught us. We almost made it to the road when they came out of the trees." "How many men?" "3. The one with the scar did the talking. He asked Mama where the notebook was." "And what did your mother say?" "She said she didn't know what he meant. Then he shot her." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The prosecutor waited for it to settle. "What happened next, Grace?" "Mama fell. The man with the scar told the others to search the wagon. They didn't find me because Mama had hidden me under the canvas. She told me to stay quiet no matter what happened. So I did." "Even while your mother was dying?" Grace's composure cracked for just a moment. Her eyes found Caleb's across the crowded room. "Even then," she whispered, "because that's what she wanted. She wanted me to live." The defense attorney tried to discredit her testimony, called her too young to be reliable, suggested she'd been coached, implied her memory had been corrupted by trauma. Grace answered every question with the same unwavering calm. "I know what I saw. I know what I heard. That man shot my mama and left me to freeze in the snow, and the man sitting over there paid him to do it." She pointed directly at Victor Crane. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Crane's face went pale with fury. But the damage was done. Grace Harper, 7 years old, had looked a murderer in the eye and named him for what he was. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. Murder, conspiracy, fraud, bribery. The list went on and on. Victor Crane stood motionless as the verdict was read, his empire crumbling around him with each word. Silas Burke and the other surviving henchmen received similar sentences. The evidence in Thomas Harper's notebook had proven devastating. Bank records correspondence, falsified safety reports. Everything Crane had worked to hide was laid bare for the world to see. This court sentences Victor Crane to death by hanging, the judge pronounced. May God have mercy on your soul. Grace watched from her seat beside Caleb. She didn't smile, didn't cry, just watched as the man who'd destroyed her family was led away in chains. It's done, Caleb said quietly. Not yet. Grace's hand found his. I need to see Mama, before we go home. They left Helena 2 days later, traveling back through Miller's Pass toward Silver Creek. The spring thaw had begun filling the creeks with snowmelt and dotting the hillsides with early wildflowers. The world was coming back to life. Ellen Harper's grave lay exactly as they'd left it, the wooden cross weathered, but still standing. Grace knelt in the soft earth and placed a handful of purple crocuses against the marker. Hi, Mama. Caleb stepped back, giving her space. I wanted to tell you it's over. The men who hurt you are going to be punished. Papa's notebook helped put them away forever. Grace's voice wavered but didn't break. I was so scared, Mama, for so long. But Caleb found me. He kept me safe, just like you would have wanted. She was quiet for a moment, fingers tracing the letters carved into the cross. I'm going to live with him now, in his cabin. He's going to teach me to ride and track and all sorts of things. I think you'd like him, Mama. He's got sad eyes like Papa did sometimes, but not the angry kind of sad. The missing someone kind. Grace pulled something from her pocket. The button she'd buried months ago, now cleaned and polished. I dug this up. I hope that's okay. I wanted to keep a piece of you with me always, but I'm leaving something too. She withdrew a folded piece of paper and tucked it under a stone by the cross. It's a drawing I made, of our new home, so you can see where I'll be. So you can find me if you ever want to visit in my dreams. She stood wiping dirt from her knees. I love you, Mama. I'll always love you. But I'm going to be okay now. I promise. Grace walked back to where Caleb waited. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. Ready to go home? Yeah, she said. I'm ready. They rode west toward Silver Creek, stopping briefly to visit Martha Hensley. The older woman cried when she saw Grace pulling her into a fierce embrace. Look at you, healthy and whole. I prayed for this every night. Thank you, Mrs. Hensley, for everything you did. You're welcome, child. You're welcome 1,000 times over. Martha turned to Caleb with a knowing look. I hear congratulations are in order. Ma'am. The adoption papers. Judge Blackwell and Helena processed them yesterday. It's official now. Her smile widened. You're a father again, Caleb Morgan. Caleb felt the breath leave his body. He'd submitted the paperwork weeks ago during the trial. Hadn't dared to hope it would be approved so quickly. Is it true? Grace asked, her voice small and wondering. You're really my pa now. For real. For real, he managed. If you still want that. Grace threw herself into his arms with enough force to stagger him. Of course I want that. I wanted it from the first night. When you sat up in that chair watching over me. When you promised you'd keep me safe. She pulled back, tears streaming down her face. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Caleb Morgan. And I'm glad you're my pa. Martha dabbed at her eyes with her apron. Lord have mercy. You two are going to make an old woman cry. They stayed the night at the boarding house, then set out at dawn for the final leg of their journey. The trail wound through familiar territory now. Landmarks Caleb had known for years took on new meaning with Grace riding beside him. "That's where I shot my first elk," he told her, pointing to a meadow. "And over there's where Ruth and I had our first picnic after we were married." Grace absorbed each story like a sponge, asking questions, demanding details. She wanted to know everything about his life before her, about Ruth and Lily, about the man he'd been before grief hollowed him out. "Were you happy before they died?" "Happiest I'd ever been. Thought nothing could touch us. Thought we had forever." "Do you think you can be happy again?" "With me?" Caleb considered the question carefully. Grace deserved honesty always. "I already am," he said finally. "Different kind of happy than before. Won't pretend otherwise. But happy just the same. Maybe even more so because I know what it's like to lose everything. Makes holding on that much sweeter." Grace smiled. "That's a good answer." "You think so?" "Mama would have thought so. She always said the deepest joy comes from walking through the deepest pain." "Your mama was a wise woman." "She was, and now I got a wise pa to keep teaching me." The cabin appeared in late afternoon, exactly as they'd left it weeks ago. Snow still clung to the north-facing eaves, but the pasture had begun to green. Jasper whinnied from the stable, recognizing his home. Grace dismounted and stood in the yard, turning slowly to take it all in. "It's smaller than I remembered." "Too small." "No." She smiled up at him. "Just right." They spent the first days cleaning and repairing. Winter had been hard on the cabin, and Caleb had been gone longer than ever before. Grace threw herself into every task with enthusiasm, sweeping floors, washing windows, organizing the supplies they'd brought from town. "Where should I put my things?" she asked, holding the small bundle of possessions she'd accumulated. Caleb pointed to the shelf he'd cleared months ago, that first night when she was still a half-frozen stranger. "That's yours. Has been since the beginning." Grace arranged her treasures carefully. The button from her mother's dress, the locket with her parents' portraits, the small knife Caleb had given her, the Bible that had belonged to Ellen Harper. And something new. A carved wooden horse Caleb had been working on during quiet moments in Helena. Rough, but recognizable. "When did you make this?" "During the trial. Needed something to do with my hands while we waited." Grace held the little horse up to the light. "It looks like Jasper." "That was the idea. Figured every girl needs a horse, even a wooden one." She placed it in the center of her shelf, the position of honor. "It's perfect. Thank you, Pa." The word still caught him off guard, still made his heart clench in ways he couldn't explain. 4 years he'd lived without hearing it. 4 years of silence where a child's voice should have been. "You're welcome, sweetheart." Spring came fully in the weeks that followed. Caleb taught Grace to fish in the creek behind the cabin, taught her to identify animal tracks and edible plants, taught her to shoot with the small rifle he'd bought in Silver Creek, watching with pride as her aim improved day by day. She taught him things too: how to laugh again, how to look forward instead of always back, how to let someone pass the walls he'd built so carefully around his wounded heart. "Tell me about Lily," she asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "What was she like?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. The question didn't hurt the way it once would have. Instead, it felt like an invitation, a chance to share something precious. "She was stubborn," he said. "Lord, was she stubborn. Once she got an idea in her head, nothing could shake it loose. Ruth used to say she got it from me. What else? She loved animals, would try to bring home every stray creature she found. Baby birds, injured rabbits, once even a skunk." He chuckled at the memory. Ruth nearly had a fit over that one. "Did she look like you?" "Had her mama's eyes, dark brown, almost black. But my chin, or so Ruth claimed, and my laugh." Grace leaned against his shoulder. "I wish I could have met her." "She would have liked you. You've got the same spirit, the same fire." You think so? I know so. They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. Stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had witnessed so much pain and loss and unexpected redemption. Pa. Yeah. I don't want to replace Lily. I know I can't. I just want you to know that. Caleb put his arm around her, pulling her close. You're not replacing anyone, Grace. Hearts don't work that way. They just grow bigger to make room for new people. Lily's still in there. Ruth too. And now you. All of you together. That's a nice way to think about it. It's the truth. Grace yawned, her small body growing heavy against his side. Time for bed, Caleb said. 5 more minutes. You said that 10 minutes ago. Just want to watch the stars a little longer. Mama used to say that when we look at stars, we're really seeing the past. Because the light takes so long to reach us. Your mama was right about that. So when I look up there, maybe I'm seeing light from when Mama was still alive. From when Lily and Ruth were still alive. They're all still up there somewhere, shining down. Caleb's throat tightened. This child, this remarkable child, had a way of finding beauty in the darkest places. I like that thought, he managed. Me too. A few minutes later, he carried her inside and tucked her into bed. She was asleep before he finished pulling up the quilts, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been during those first terrible nights. Caleb sat in his chair by the fire watching her sleep. He thought about the journey that had brought them here. The storm, the wagon, the gunfights and trials, and long nights of fear. He thought about Ruth and Lily buried on the hill behind the cabin. About Ellen Harper resting in peace, knowing her daughter was safe. About all the loss and grief that had shaped both their lives. And he thought about the future. Grace growing up here, learning the land, becoming strong and capable. Birthdays and holidays and ordinary days that would stack up into a lifetime. Arguments and laughter and everything in between. A family. Imperfect and scarred, but real. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, the same sound that had led him to Grace in the first place. Caleb smiled at the irony. He'd gone out that night to hunt a predator and found a daughter instead. Life had a way of surprising you. Thank you, he whispered into the darkness. To Ruth, to Lily, to whatever force had guided his path through the snow that night. Thank you for giving me another chance. The fire crackled. Grace murmured in her sleep. And Caleb Morgan, who had thought himself beyond redemption, felt something he hadn't experienced in 4 long years. Peace. The months turned. Summer came with its long days and warm nights. Grace grew taller, stronger, more confident. She learned to ride properly, to track game, to read the weather in the clouds. She learned to cook and mend and keep house. She learned 100 skills that would serve her well in this hard country. But she also learned gentler things. How to press wildflowers between pages. How to sing the old hymns her mother had loved. How to sit quietly and watch the world without needing to fill the silence with words. On the anniversary of their meeting, Caleb woke to find Grace already up, standing by the window watching the snowfall. It's just like that first night, she said softly. Remember? I remember. So much has changed since then. Everything's changed. Grace turned to face him. At 8 years old now, she was losing the roundness of early childhood. Her face was longer, more defined, but her eyes were the same. Green as spring grass, filled with wisdom beyond her years. I used to have nightmares, she said. About Mama. About the men who chased us. About being alone. I know. I heard you sometimes. I don't have them anymore. Haven't for months. She crossed to where he sat and climbed into his lap, something she still did, despite being almost too big for it. Because of you. Because I know you'll always be there. Caleb held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair. I'll always be there, Grace, no matter what. That's a promise. I know, Pa. I've always known. They sat together as the snow fell outside, two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built something beautiful from the wreckage. A family, forged in fire and loss and love. Grace Harper Morgan, daughter by choice, not by blood. Living proof that hope could survive anything. And Caleb Morgan, father again, against all odds. A broken man made whole by a child's trust. Outside, the winter wind howled across the prairie, but inside the cabin there was warmth and light, and the quiet certainty that comes from knowing exactly where you belong. They were home. They were family. And nothing would ever take that away.